Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new installment of AV Veterans Talk. I'm your host, Bob Alvis, and this week we're talking to Dennis Anderson and Juan Blanco about coffee for vets at Crazy Autos here in Lancaster. Good morning, and welcome to another episode of AV Veterans Talk here at Aerotech News here in Lancaster. And I got a couple of distinguished gentlemen with me looking forward to sharing a little bit of stories here that happened over the last couple of days, and also an event that's coming up that we want to get the word out about there. But we have Dennis Anderson here, who's been in the chair here once before. With interesting stuff happened last night that we wanted to discuss with, and we got Juan Blanco. Juan Blanco. Spit it out there, Juan Blanco. And you are a veteran, and you actually are also part of the Vets for Coffee?
Coffee for Vets.
Coffee for Vets? Vets for Coffee. I'm
That's
sure
close.
all vets are for coffee, right?
Vets generally are for coffee.
That's right. That's good.
But I would add that Juan and I have an eccentric service-connected
Yes, we have.
connection.
Yes, you do.
I'll let Juan.
Well, we met back in 1999.
Uh-huh.
I was running for city council, and he was the editor of the paper.
Correct.
You were brand new, pretty much, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah. And we're sitting across from each other, and he had a little 8th Infantry badge on, airborne. And I said, "You were with the 8th?" And he says, "Yeah." And there we are.
There you are.
The 8th Infantry Division, with its airborne brigade, is one of the bygone units. It deactivated after the first Gulf War. But it had been in Europe continuously since about D+6, since June of 1944. It was in the next wave that followed immediately after the D-Day invasion into the Normandy and the Saint-Lô breakout.
Right.
And it was there all the way through VE Day, and then all the way through until the end of the Cold War.
Did they jump into Germany?
No, it was a
No.
straight leg infantry division then.
Straight leg.
But
Okay.
during the Cold War, they added an airborne brigade, of which Juan was a part of it, and I was a part of it.
Right.
We think we were a couple of years apart, but we were each as confused as the other in Cold War Germany. It was a confusing war.
Yeah, and you both ended up in Germany. Was it the same base?
No,
No?
No, he was in a different base, but we were in the same division.
Right. And then over a different time period.
there just aren't that many 8th Infantry with a connection through either Fort Benning Jump School or through the 8th Infantry Division Jump School that I went through at Wiesbaden Air Force Base.
Right.
So for those that were there, Dennis was in bomb holder, and I was in headquarters company.
There you go. So, and you know what? You're a big guy for him.
Yeah,
Jumper.
people say that all the time, but I wasn't the largest guy that put on a harness.
Yeah.
So, but then again, I only weighed like 135, 140 pounds, so I really was kind of light.
Kind of light here. So
But that is our connection through
Yeah.
service, as we are connected with you, Bob, through the Cold War.
there you go. Exactly. Well, the reason you're here and stuff is we interacted last night. We were over at Crazy Autos here in Lancaster, and Jen, who
Avenue I store.
Avenue I. What did I say?
You always said Lancaster, but they have 2 stores.
They do have 2 stores,
Avenue I.
but a lot
Great
of
American success story.
great
Crazy
American
Autos.
success story, right?
Yes.
Jen, the owner of Crazy Autos, is Korean.
Yep.
And
Korean American.
Korean American, South Korean. You guys are just.
We're tough.
I'll tell you, it's like rough crowd here, rough crowd. They're trying to get this stuff. So anyway, every year he pretty much tries to. His father's legacy is
Sure.
paying homage to the American soldier that during a very tense standoff time. Dennis, I'll have you kind of explain.
Well, Jen Hur of Crazy Autos pays forward by paying it back a little bit. Oftentimes, the Korean War was described historically as a forgotten war because it fell between the end of the Great World War II, with America victorious and a global superpower, and before the Vietnam War, which went on for much longer. And still, in the 3 years that the Korean War was waged, from 1950 to 1953, there were about 12,000 Americans a year killed. There also were some huge historic engagements, like the Incheon landing, where General MacArthur cut the Korean Peninsula in half, and then the ill-fated move up to the Chinese border, which saw them in the winter at Frozen Chosin, it was called,
Right.
Chosin Reservoir. And of course, we both have veterans we knew who were flying supplies
Yes, we
to
do.
reinforce the Chosin breakout. But the Marines were surrounded there. The Army was surrounded there, and large elements of the South Korean Army. But June 25th, yesterday, Crazy Autos was a significant date because that was the day that Kim Jong-un's grandfather, Kim Il-sung,
Yes.
Kim Il-sung was trained by Joseph Stalin and had been a war fighter in World War II, and he wanted to unify the Korean Peninsula under a Soviet Stalinist-style hegemony. And he had the tanks to do it. He had the aircraft and the artillery, much as the situation is right now.
Right.
It was also a war that began by a miscalculation. They had misread Stalin and Kim Il-sung misread Americans' intentionality, because our Secretary of State had mentioned a number of Asian countries that we would defend without mentioning Korea, which Kim Il-sung used for his green light. So on that morning of June 25th, there were dozens and dozens of, the best tank in the world at this time was the T-34 Stalin tank.
Yeah.
There were Soviet Ilyushin aircraft flying sweeps and artillery, and of course Pyongyang is only about 50 miles north of Seoul, so they were driving from the 38th parallel towards Seoul very rapidly. So Crazy Auto's owner, Jin He was born in 1960, but each of his older brothers, they were there when this calamity happened. And Jin's father rescued the family by carrying the family out on bicycle handlebars, really. And he would pedal them across the bridge. And the last, he came back to get his wife, and he carried her out, and then they blew the bridge. So they joined with other relatives on the Korean coast, and that's ultimately how Jin came here to the United States.
Yeah.
So he prizes this date, and for many years now he's held this dinner to thank Korean War veterans.
Yeah, very nice. So we're going to take our first break here. When we come back and stuff, we'll continue this journey. We'll talk a little bit more about Jin and Crazy Autos there. So we'll be right back here at AV Veterans Talk. I'm Bob Alvis, and thanks for joining us for this segment of AV Veterans Talk.